And go live now to national security analyst Professor Ryan Mauro from the Clarion Project. You're welcome to the programme. So the FBI has now confirmed that they're acting on a terrorism call here, but they have not directly linked it to ISIL. Why are investigators not making that connection with a lot of the information that we're seeing? Are they hedging their bets here, or is it going to come out later?
I think it's just out of being responsible that the agencies like the FBI don't want to make a firm conclusion public until they have all the evidence gathered, even if they're 99% sure that it's ISIS. So the information out there right now that indicates it's ISIS is all stuff that's leaking out from anonymous officials. The information that the woman pledged her allegiance to ISIS on a social media account, perhaps even during the attack. The fact that the male suspect was in contact with 5 individuals who were under investigation for terrorist ties, including to Al-Qaeda. The investigations were closed. All of this is coming from leaks and not from direct release from the FBI because they want to present it all at once.
An ISIS-affiliated news agency we know says the attackers were ISIL supporters. Does that mean, and we know that this is very bitty, we're getting information in bits and pieces here, but does that mean that ISIL has taken responsibility for the attack, do you think?
Not yet. What was interesting to me is that as this attack was going on, unlike in Paris, I saw that the ISIS accounts that I monitor online were not taking credit. They weren't even talking about it that much. They were mocking the U.S. for having violence, but they weren't saying, "This is us." Now they're talking about it more, but that's because of public information being released, so they feel like they can cheer. But there has not been this official declaration of responsibility yet.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because Friday's developments suggest that the shootings, if not orchestrated, may have been inspired by terrorist activities. How likely is that? And is there a real fear of more such copycat attacks coming now in the light of this, do you think?
It does. Increase the possibility of copycat attacks. That's because of 2 reasons. First, there are individuals that are Islamic extremists that don't just want to please God in their mind by carrying out an attack, but they also want to be famous. So when there's a big story like this, they want their name to be part of that story. So carry out an attack so that they become part of this. And then secondly, there are going to be those that are concerned that they are under FBI surveillance, and they're going to say, I need to carry out an attack before I lose the opportunity, because I'm sure that any second now, the FBI is going to be raiding my home. So there is a risk there, but there's also some serious questions that remain for me. How did this individual meet his wife, as he was referring to her? How did they meet online? Because that's why he went to Saudi Arabia, was to supposedly go there and then marry her. Who were these 5 individuals that he was communicating with that were linked to terrorism? And why were those investigations closed? Did we mess up there? And finally, what about, is this part of a larger scheme now where ISIS and terrorist groups are trying to lure men in by saying, come here and come date and possibly marry this woman for you? We've seen it happen in reverse. We've seen ISIS men looking for wives and then prey upon young women, but this would be reverse if it's actually part of a new tactic.
Yeah, another aspect here is the public really knowing what's going on here. I'll come back to you in a moment. We're speaking to Professor Ryan Mauro, national security analyst. Ryan, I just want to play a piece to our audience from last week from President Obama as he tried to assure the American people that their country did not currently face a terror threat. Take a look at this.
Right now, we know of no specific and credible intelligence indicating a plot on the homeland. And that is based on the latest information I just received in the Situation Room.
You know, so I'm not sure if you could hear that, but he was saying that was the latest information he'd received last week, that they did not expect a terrorism attack, but yet 7 days later it's now been confirmed by the FBI that there was one. Is there an aspect here, and I understand that of course, you can't look at all terrorism suspects at all times. Of course, officials are doing a good enough job here as it is. But, this is something coming out now in an area where people travel to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia, etc. They got their hold on guns. There was a catchment of a lot of weapons here. Yet President Obama has come out and said that they weren't being checked at all. That will worry the public.
Sure, and it should. Because even though the FBI and Homeland Security are doing everything that they can to stop an attack like this. This is what they dedicate their lives to. There just isn't enough resources to identify everyone, and then of those that they identify, to track all of them 24/7. If something gets published on Facebook by an extremist, you shouldn't assume that the government necessarily knows about it. But for me, the pattern here is what's really disturbing. You had President Obama say that ISIS and these other groups are like the JV team of terrorism. They're not like Al-Qaeda. And then ISIS comes in and they declare a caliphate. President Obama says that ISIS is contained, and then within hours you have the attacks in Paris. John Kerry says that we've neutralized Al-Qaeda, basically, and then Al-Qaeda carries out an attack in Mali, and then now the example you just gave, President Obama says no credible intelligence of a specific attack, and then what happens? An orchestrated attack.
Ryan, just to get your thoughts on the weapons aspect of all this. Police say that all the weapons used were purchased legally in the US, yet they found an entire weapons lab in the shooter's home, it's believed. Is it really so easy for anybody to get such large amounts of weaponry without getting on authorities, their radar, as it were?
Well, apparently so, if you look at this. And we've got to look seriously at how even this information is shared. So, for example, we now know that... I'm sorry, did I just get cut off?
No, you can go ahead. Please go ahead,
okay.
Ryan.
Yeah, sure. And, for example, we know that the male suspect was in contact with 5 individuals that were under terrorism investigation. That type of information should go somewhere so that when he goes and tries to buy guns, the authorities now know that, because that would then tip them off and say, look, we have a new link here, new data point to consider when looking at this guy and the people that they're talking to. Maybe we shouldn't close the investigations. As for creating the bombs in their garage, I don't know yet if there was a way to necessarily stop that, because the instructions on how to do that were put out by Al-Qaeda years ago.
What are the implications now? What's the bigger picture here as regards the US stance on the Middle East and ISIS in particular, if it is found to have been an ISIS attack?
Well, you're going to see the U.S. escalate, and indeed, the U.S. already is. The U.S. recently announced that they were going to be dispatching a small expeditionary targeting force, because they didn't want to call it combat troops. It's combat troops. But the reaction on the part of the American people are going to be, you have to increase, and hopefully we can get to a partnership with Russia. Because if you look at this objectively, there are a lot of areas of common interest between the United States and between Russia, and we should be able to come up with a plan to work together, and it's unfortunate that it's not happening.
And internally, do you foresee more security than there is now on the streets, etc., or targeting more, as they see, as suspects, Islamic terror suspects in the country itself?
You're going to see increases in security just when there's a threat to a given area, but that's like what you've seen. When a specific target is mentioned in communication, they increase security. But the fact of the matter is that you're never going to have enough resources to fully protect the country, especially when we are a free democratic country. So the number of targets is limitless.
Okay, Professor Ryan Mauro, National Security Analyst, we do appreciate you coming on the program and sharing your thoughts with us and getting your expertise as well.
Thank you.
If you're